What is the reason why a business or an entrepreneur would get into this industry?
I can speak about the BrandTLD space and the opportunity there. So brand top-level domain, the way I think about a brand top-level domain is looking at today, what's the status quo and what the future looks like, and then frame that in terms of trust and security. So today, enterprises own hundreds, in many cases, thousands of domain names. And you've done that for reasons to launch new products, new services. You may have done acquisitions. So you have all of these different domain names that are out on the internet with your programs and campaigns and products. Your customers are out there looking at this, or your audiences, and they're engaging with these, and they're going, is that really the company that I want to engage with? Your domains are managed at multiple different registrars in many cases, multiple different DNS providers. And one of the challenges with your IT people is it's very difficult for them to get control of the domains, the change management, the DNS security. Some of you may know that underneath a domain name, there are resource records that's created something called a zone file. And those records are what make the internet work. They're full of all sorts of different exposures. So there's a trust issue there and a security issue with what we are operating today. You also have supply chain risks there. If you have multiple different providers, it's very difficult. Now, if you enter a brand top-level domain, you own it. And the key value contributor there, in my view, is trust. And trust includes a lot of things. So first of all, if I have a campaign and I want to label that campaign and push it out into the market, I can say message.brand. If I have a promotion or a product, one word .brand. And I will know that I'm engaging with that brand. And that's really valuable. If you look back in history, insurance.com sold for $35 million, one domain name. And that company, and the research that I've done, they showed that they made their money back on that acquisition in about 5 years. Hotels.com, another single word .com domain name, sold for $11 million. The year before that organization bought Hotels.com, they did about $500 million in revenue. Once they launched it, the next year they did almost $1 billion, $950 million in revenue. So domains and messaging are really important. And if you're a brand and you can secure that brand and be able to message on that label that can be trusted in all sorts of different use cases. Product.brand, campaign.brand, channel.brand, think of an insurance company, insurance agent Manulife insurance agent Sun Life. These are really valuable use cases. So that trust component with a brand is really important in the marketplace at a time when we're going to have potentially thousands more of top-level domains coming to market. And are you really going to go out and register defensive domains and all these different top-level domains? It just doesn't make economic sense. On the security side, you own the space. It's proprietary, you own it. You can automate all the security protocols, and I'll get a little jargon here, technical, HSTS preloads, which make sure that every site is secure. DNSSEC can be automated. The ability to add security configurations for SPF and DMARC to prevent phishing. You own everything on there, and you have access to all of that data. So it's proprietary, you control it, you can automate the security provisions on it. It creates one centralized place and one vendor, so you remove all that supply chain. You can extend that then into networks and create trust networks in your own space that you own and control. So for large organizations, medium-sized organizations, it's an opportunity to really change how you go to market, to differentiate yourself, improve your security posture, so there's a really strong ROI there. One of the things that's really interesting too is you're going to have access to different types of data on the root, something called NXD data, that's non-existent domain. So if someone goes to a browser and types something.yourbrand, you're going to see that. And then the application of AI on that data in your network is going to be very interesting. Just as a close on the value for large enterprise and medium enterprise is that you have a business objective you're trying to achieve, not just 1 year, 5 years, it's also 10, 20 years. You have new capabilities by owning your own proprietary space. And on that, you can then develop use cases to achieve those business objectives. So for brands, I think it's absolutely a game-changing opportunity to lock it down. And when you think of the cost of it, even though it seems like a lot of money, compared to owning a single domain for 35 million or 11 million, it's not a lot of money to be able to change your business, enhance your trust, and your security of your internet space.
I don't know. Does anyone else have anything else to say to that? Because that was pretty impressive. And so I'm just curious about how the reduction in terms of fraud and in terms of phishing and all that type of stuff that you mentioned, how that could potentially be seen as a cost savings for some of these large organizations.
Yeah, no question. Because you own it, you control it, people will know that it's you. You can't spoof that on the address bar. Communication is obviously really critical. We all get this stuff, into our inboxes. We really don't know who's sending it. SPF and DMARC. So sending policy framework and DMARC, which is a reporting tool to say who's sending mail from your domains. We're a corporate registrar that really focuses on DNS security. We do all sorts of DNS security assessments. And what we often see is that large organizations have maybe 10% of their domains covered with SPF and DMARC so that they cannot be used for phishing against you. But the rest of the 90% of them, nobody's managing that. And they do not have SPF or DMARC records. And the result, anybody who has technical wherewithal can send phishing emails all day. So again, it comes down to that notion of trust. And think about it when you go forward. So if you have, let's say you're an enterprise that owns 1,000 domains today and you've protected yourself across a bunch of TLDs. Okay, there's going to be another 1,000 different TLDs coming up. So you say, well, we're going to need to protect ourselves in some of those, particularly where they may match our line of business. That's just going to go on forever, and you're going to end up with a portfolio that's hugely costly. So it's not just the domain registration and renewal costs, it's also the need to be able to manage that and have systems in place to control what's going on in the DNS. Then you have fraud. So, you've got people that are squatting on your name. If over time you can make the market aware, don't trust anything unless it's .Manulife. Some of these campaigns that the bad guys are trying to use to fool your audiences and customers, they won't work anymore. You need to go out and file what's called a UDRP, which is a legal complaint to get control of that domain where someone may be infringing on your brand. That's going to be less important in the future. And we're talking about 10, 20, 30 years as you've built up this space that you own and control. So there is, for many brands that have a lot of domains and manage the challenges of intellectual property protection, there's a total cost of ownership savings over time, even though you have this initial CapEx to be able to get TLD and on-ramp it. So if you own it, you can do anything with it. Anything. You can launch any kind of a program. The cost to get one more domain once you've paid the CapEx is nominal. Maybe a couple of bucks a year to your back-end registry provider, depending on what SEER is charging. Something extremely reasonable. If you wanted to protect IoT networks, you could register 1A27555.brand, and that can be an endpoint, and you can secure that endpoint. All of this can be automated, which reduces the human cost of labor to be able to manage your secure infrastructure. So there's a real ROI and cost-saving benefit over the long term.
Which Canadian or U.S. companies do you see as the most promising leaders driving the next phase of internet innovation and digital growth?
Digital growth in today's day and age and what we're all dealing with has to be an AI company, right? Frankly, what people are seeing, whether it's, Anthropic or OpenAI or any of these guys, this is incredible technology with incredible use cases that we're all looking at it today and going, oh my goodness, this is a threat, this is scary, but this is also very exciting. But recognize that that's all going to sit on the DNS. The DNS is still going to operate all of that, regardless of what kind of innovation is going on. I think we think of the internet, it's been around for a while, but I really think we're at the very early days of the internet. So think about where it's going to be, not just 2 or 3 years, but in 10 years, 20 years. If you're a brand, my view is you need to own your own space, and whatever you're going to build and innovate on, it's got to be on your own space. What I find very interesting in the AI side in BrandTLDs is the data. AI is all about the data. So if you own your brand top level domain and you invest in that top-level domain space, and you create these networks, and you expand it through all sorts of different means at a very economical cost, all that data is accessible to you, and you've never had access to it before. So something that we're exploring is saying, okay, what could you do with AI to understand what's going on in your own proprietary network? I don't know yet, is the answer. But if you've got the data, we know we're going to find insights, and we're going to find market behaviors and be able to instantly react to market behaviors using AI tools and different control systems to push new things out to the market. I think it's going to be really interesting because it's a data set that you control. It's proprietary, but it also leverages the commons of the internet and the DNS that ICANN governs and ensures is stable and secure. It's a really fantastic opportunity over the long term.
You talked earlier, Peter, about the future and what innovation we haven't even seen yet.
Right.
Even just in the last 5 years, we've seen a handful of innovation in the domain space that just didn't exist before. I'm curious how you see that evolving.
Okay, I'll go back in sort of 2015, 2016. The first brands started to launch stuff. Slowly but surely they launched it. And there's more and more brands that are using it today. HSBC provided a presentation. They started using .hsbc as a URL shortener in Twitter at the time. They saw a 30% jump in engagement rates as a result of using that trusted space. I think there's a lot still, Spencer, just to be determined. But I think that if you look at what are we trying to do as a business, sort of back to this concept of I have business objectives and we have innovation opportunity, things that we want to do. Okay, now I've got this new capability. How can we create a mesh network? How can we put an IP address or a name or a label on every car that comes off the line? And then how can we ensure that that thing is secure? And you can do that with your BrandTLD and passing data back and forth. Any use case you can imagine in the visible web. There's also other use cases on the network side that can improve your security and performance of your network, and then coming back to the data. I don't know if I've offered much of a glimpse into that, but start thinking about what you could do. Start thinking about what you're trying to achieve and engaging with your audiences, engaging better with your customers, and driving more affinity. You can do anything you want, and it costs you almost nothing to do it once you own the asset. I think that's the most interesting piece. Massively scalable. I also like the use case of channel. If you're a technology company, or I like the insurance example where, you have insurance agent name .manulife.sunlife. So now you've got a space for that agent, and you can use your content delivery systems to cascade out content to all of those different agents across your network. The same thing goes with, value-added resellers of a technology product or service. You could say, okay, we have resellers out there that are saying, hey, I'm a reseller of ABC service. How do I really know you are? But if it was on, let's just take Rogers. If it was on Rogers, it's a way to say, yes, this is a real distributor of a Rogers wireless service or whatever it might be. And, you can use that to also say, in the registry, you're an accredited reseller of our services. So it's also a way to manage that distribution as well as distribute content out to that market. Just two examples. Just think about all the ways you go to market, all the ways that you service clients with this capability. What could you do with that? So for creative folks that are trying to solve business objectives, here's some capabilities. All right, let's get into a room and think of the use cases that would lend themselves to achieve that objective.
Now, we're already seeing deepfakes of all different kinds, whether it be video or audio or text or whatever, email, all kinds of different things, entering into the sort of technosphere. And this feels like an opportunity that didn't really exist 10 years ago during round one. Now there's actually a very clear use case for having to prove who you are.
Absolutely. And I said at the beginning, this is really about trust. Trust involves a lot of things, the security component. So if I'm going to trust it, I got to make sure I lock down my security piece. And as you're talking about that, deep fakes, someone's got to call Taylor Swift. She needs to own Taylor Swift. And, everything there is officially, it's really her.
I'm just going to say .swifty.
.swifty.
Probably, yeah.
Sure, whatever it might be. The internet's getting more dangerous all the time. We all know it. I see things and I go, okay, that looks real, but I'm really not sure. So I err on, no, I'm not clicking on it. and I might have missed a great business opportunity. I might have missed a great service. I'm not clicking on it. And we're all being trained not to do that. But, if it's a .brand, this is real. I know that I can click on that. My service provider is trying to reach out to me. So it's about trust. Because you control it, you can guarantee that trust because you can automate the security of that network.
I just want to jump back on the data piece for a second that you raised earlier, Peter. And what I find interesting that you raised earlier is this idea that if you own your TLD, whether it be a brand or a geo, we haven't talked about geos yet, is the ability to sort of own all that data and then make business decisions and potentially product decisions out of that.
We sometimes speak in a different language in the DNS space. So the root really means that you own it, it's yours. Sierra sees it for everything.ca. So one of the things that I've always found sort of interesting is that, okay, let's say I own .bmo and I start to set up websites, I start to push campaigns out, but I don't set up everything. And then I start to see people are going into the address bar and they're typing in mortgage.bmo, but I don't have it set up. Or, insurance.bmo or insurance rates.bmo, and I don't see it. So because you have access to that data, you're going to see that. So let's say that you get to a point where you say, okay, so if I see real search terms from real human beings that are searching mortgage.bmo 10 times an hour, or whatever number you want to stick on it, the system can automate the creation of that name, point that to wherever you want inside your BMO site for mortgages, and automatically create that presence. So it's something that, I've thought about for a while. That's really a real-time presence. So what you're doing there is you're responding to the market in real time. Say, market is demanding this. Because I own the data, I now have the capability to do this. So there's maybe one example. I also think it's interesting just seeing the data that you're going to have access to. It's going to be a lot of data. So how are you going to parse that? And again, I think there's we haven't exercised this obviously because AI is early, but being able to use AI to try to figure out patterns, whether or not they're things people are searching or where they're going back and forth to, there's going to be opportunities there to also be really quick in the market and responding to what's going on in the market in real time. There's a lot of complexity in owning and applying and making sure you do it right. I think the most important thing that if you represent a brand, they need to be aware that this is happening. They need to understand what the value contributors could be for that organization. And to the point of saying, okay, we need to establish a vision at a sponsor level within the organization, probably right up to the CEO, maybe CMO, CISO, whoever feels it drives the most for them. So you need to establish that vision and then look at the different stakeholders that might be involved across the organization and say, okay, we concur that this is worth an investment, we need to do it. At Authentic Web, I've been in this space since 1999, and we help brands understand this. I'd also point out one other thing is that the brand registry group, there's an association of brands that formed some years ago after the first round. So you go to brandregistrygroup.org. If you're a brand, feel free to join. I'm on the board there. And this is a group of people that meet with a whole bunch of brands who get together monthly, talk about some of the issues, and then advocate and also communicate to ICANN about what those policies are. So the Brand Registry Group is one source. If you'd like to learn more, I've left out a few flyers over here, business card. You can certainly reach out. Happy to give your executive just a briefing. Let's say, hey, this is something you're going to look for. It's coming in April 2026. So it's not that long that you're going to need to think about, are we going to make an informed decision to apply or an informed decision not to apply? That's probably the most important thing. They need to understand it. And then we don't really know when the next round is going to be coming. Last one was 13 years ago. So there's some urgency to make sure that you don't miss this and understand what the opportunity looks like.